People who are displaced have many intersecting identities, like gender, age, race, and ability or disability. Some of the refugees who are coming to Canada through resettlement live with a disability. This video presents an overview of how refugees with disabilities come to Canada and some of the challenges they face upon arrival. What is disability? According to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, persons with disabilities include those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Article 1. The United Nations Convention adopts a social model of disability, which emphasizes environmental barriers and discriminatory attitudes, like inaccessible buildings or an unwillingness to hire people with disabilities. These definitions show that disability is not just about individual abilities or impairments. How people understand disability has changed over time and can be very different in different cultures, including among Indigenous and refugee communities. Disability and refugee resettlement to Canada. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, may refer refugees for resettlement to Canada because of serious medical issues. Until recently, Canada limited the number of resettled refugees with high medical needs to only 5% each year. Today, Canada considers refugees with medical needs on a case-by-case basis, but it's hard to say whether on the ground that makes it easier for refugees with medical needs to come to Canada. Refugees with disabilities may also be referred for resettlement for other reasons. After referral by UNHCR or selection by a private sponsor, refugees with disabilities may come through any of Canada's resettlement programs. Resettlement to Canada may offer access to medical care, disability services, assistive devices, and inclusive education opportunities that are not available in the country of asylum. For example, a refugee with mobility needs might get a motorized wheelchair for the first time in Canada. A refugee child who is excluded from school on the basis of her disability may get the chance to go to school for the first time. And a refugee with a rare and serious health condition might get the medical treatment that she needs. Ongoing barriers. However, there continue to be barriers to accessing settlement services and disability-related services. Services for people with disabilities or medical conditions often do not have the tools to effectively serve refugees with disabilities. For example, specialized healthcare services might not offer language interpretation. Settlement agencies who serve newcomers to Canada might not have the tools to effectively support refugees with disabilities. There are also ongoing issues with stigma and discrimination. Refugees with disabilities in Canada experience stigma and discrimination because of both their refugee background and disability. Integration is problematically understood narrowly in terms of individual adaptation and economic success. Instead, we need to change institutions and conditions in Canada to make them more accessible, inclusive, and responsive to the needs of refugees with disabilities. Returning to the social model of disability and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities mentioned at the beginning of this video, there needs to be more of a focus on changing the disabling conditions in the broader society, from inaccessible systems to discriminatory attitudes. In conclusion, refugees with disabilities may be selected for resettlement to Canada, but the government limits the number of resettled refugees with complex medical needs. Once in Canada, resettled refugees may be able to access specialized services, but barriers remain. More needs to be done to make such services accessible to newly arrived refugees and to address ongoing discrimination against people with disabilities.